I have Petrina here from Homegrown Florida, and I'm super excited to be helping her with native plants because you guys know I am super passionate about my fellow Floridians putting in native plants. And she's already bought a couple.
I'm so excited, guys. These plants, I got the inspiration from your channel. And just number one, when I came over and all the bees, the pollinators, the butterflies, all of that stuff, I'm like, this is gonna help my garden. And it's gonna help wildlife.
Yeah.
Which I know you're really passionate about.
Really passionate. And what's crazy, since the last time you were over at my house like a month ago, the amount of butterflies has probably doubled.
I can't even imagine that because there was already like hundreds, guys.
There's a lot, and now there's even more. So I'm really excited to be able to help you like get it in your garden and help our wildlife, because I think sometimes we think about when it comes to native gardens and wildlife gardens, like we have to have acres of land.
Right.
We have to like pay money to some conservation group, but we can just start with our own houses.
Yeah, guys, this is a suburban lot. My lot, I mean, I don't know if it looks bigger in the videos, but it's small. You saw it.
Yeah.
It's not a big lot. It's like an average size home.
Yeah.
You can do a lot in that. You can plant natives, you can do butterfly gardens, you can grow your own food. You have the space, even if you're on a balcony. Get with your natives.
Yeah, and here's what the thing I noticed, and it sounds like is this change for you already, is she's already bought a couple plants, which is that you're already getting some new wildlife into your garden, and the stuff's not even in the ground yet. But what we want to really talk about is before you buy stuff,
unlike me, who went out and impulse buy,
what should you think about for actually picking out plants? Where should you put them, and all the different tips. So let's get started. And the first part is, what is your goal? That's the biggest tip, because when we think about native plants, there are a lot of different reasons to do native plants, from wildlife to drought tolerance to reducing chemical usage, all sorts of things.
Hold on, sorry. Do you see them?
Oh yeah, you got bumblebee right there.
Sorry guys. This is like a total gardener moment. I'm like, wait, stop filming. Look at them.
But there's all different reasons to have native plants. And so what's important is you start with what's your priority. And that's tip number one, is to figure out what's the biggest reason, because different native plants can help you with your goal. And so if you're going to make sure you get what you're looking for in your garden, you want to understand that. So we need to first understand, what's Petrina's goal with getting some native plants today? So
front yard, it's really, and I hate to even say this because it's like totally not wildlife specific, but it's to be pretty. Honestly, low maintenance and pretty. That's what I want my front yard. I spend a lot of time back here. So
with fussy veggies.
Very fussy veggies. And I want easy, pretty, and uniformed plants out front. And, you know, of course, I do want there to be a sanctuary here for the wildlife to be able to eat and tear them apart, and they grow back, and like, I don't have to fuss with them. But back here, different goal.
Different.
Very
That's
different.
Okay. You can have different goals for different spaces.
Yeah. The back here goal is, you know, I love my garden. I love my veggies. I hand pollinate a lot.
Oh,
I would rather.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like with like a paintbrush or like a hand?
Paintbrush.
That's even fussier than
I'll
what
show
I deal
you.
with.
I have a little bucket over there with different size paintbrushes. So
I didn't know you were doing that.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And you saw we just had that little, what was that? A honey?
That was a bumblebee.
A bumblebee, yeah. The second thing that I really want to do is I want to help with the pest pressure, right? So I don't spray. I don't like to spray. I like nature to take its course, and that means I lose a lot of plants, and I'm okay with that. But if there's a beautiful butterfly or a bird or a bug that's, you know, predatory, I would much rather them come here and take care of the problem, and then I can maybe save my plant. So that's the two big goals for back here.
Okay, so we want to increase pollinators. We want to do it, of course, in a very friendly, eco-friendly way, and of course we want to try to do it native, and if we can bring in our predators, would also be awesome.
Hey, pretty also helps.
And pretty. I can do that. So the second thing to think about is, once you know your goals, is what spaces are you thinking about? And so let's go.
Let me show you.
Let's go look for that. So when we think about spaces, one of the things I did want to show you guys in Petrina's backyard garden is we really are limited on locations to add outside of her vegetable beds. So Petrina is going to show us one of the few available locations for a native plant garden.
As you guys have seen in a lot of my videos, there is a RV on one side of the house, so we can't really put anything there. Then we have all of the beds, which are all aligned with only about a 3-foot walk space. So this is the area where we can use and plant some of our native plants. So over in this space, I would absolutely love to find something, but guys, this is shade, shade, shade. It gets absolutely no sun. There is a host of very random trees up here. I don't even know what kind. And so this area gets nothing. So as you can see, we just kind of prop stuff over here, but it would be great if we had some big statement piece over here that wouldn't mind the shade. And then let's walk over here. My husband has been cutting out parts of the yard, and one of which is going to be this line right here. You can kind of see there's a little bit of spray paint. We're going to pull all the grass out of here and create a flower bed here that I would love to put native plants in. And then I'm going to put Jacqueline to the test. So this area right here, if you thought my soil was sandy before, you should have seen this before we put the rocks in. This was straight beach sand. There was nothing here. So we kept having like issues with sand fleas and all kinds of weird stuff. So we dug it out. And so I'm thinking, can you do some stuff in containers?
So that really means you are limited on space.
Tight.
But there are still native plants that we can work with. So really the areas we're going to focus on discussing design for is the space right behind us and yes, we have
Vanna White it for them.
And then we'll talk about what we could do with containers, and then we can talk about the shade. But this really brings us to the second thing you need to think about, which is when you decide on a space, is it full sun? Is it full shade?
Yeah.
Is it a partial sun? And partial sun, as many have heard before, can mean a lot of different things, because partial sun can mean dappled shade all day. It can mean full sun in the morning and then shade the rest of the day.
The front of the house is that morning, nothing in the afternoon.
Or vice versa, only the afternoon. So partial shade can mean different things, and different plants will like or not like that partial shade. So what it looks like we have here that we want to look at is we got a full sun.
Full 360 right here.
We got a full shade. And then because this is the southern side of our house, I will call it full sun for half the year, but partial shade for our late fall, winter, and our beginning of spring months.
Right.
Because you're going to get sun from the house once the sun kind of goes that way. Now the third thing.
Sorry.
The third thing.
Sorry.
So the third thing you're going to want to think about is what are your soil conditions and your watering conditions. And I kind of put those hand in hand, especially if you live like Petrina and myself, if you live in the city and the suburbs, which most of us do, and you probably have some amount of irrigation and a lawn.
Well,
limited.
Let me tell you the wonderful thing.
Oh, what do you got?
I have, not only do we have full irrigation, I have it on a timer. I can point it in whatever direction I want. I can do micro sprayers. I can do drip irrigation.
Oh, wow.
I can do all kinds of stuff. And it's an app on my phone.
She's fancy.
Irrigation's good, but soil.
So a lot of Floridians, we're starting with sandy soil.
Yeah, you saw mine.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, there's some sand here. I mean, it's pretty normal, especially, you know, your house isn't quite as old as mine. And so when we dug down for looking inside the soil, we really quickly hit the builder grade sand that they use for just leveling the ground, which isn't even what I would call Florida sandy soil. That's just builder sand. So you got to understand what soil you're working with. If you don't understand what soil you have, you can always send in samples to the University of Florida, IFAS, and I'll put a link here and I'll put it in the description down below. So you can always send it in and they can give you a composition of what you're dealing with. But you're going to just notice stuff like, does the soil, does it look like what you get in bag soil from like Home Depot, Lowe's? If it's lighter, sandy. If it's more red, clay.
And if it's that brownish beige color, that's that builder's dirt.
Yeah, like if it's, or yellow.
Yeah,
I think that was
yellow. It was
you
really
kind of see like it's yellow. The other thing is when we talk about watering, if you have like irrigation, is that you want to think through like when, and especially my Floridians, or no matter where you are in the world, do you have parts of your yard that always seem to have dead grass, or have muddy puddles, or is your standard grass kind of already working there? If it's standard grass, then you're kind of in that like moist but not wet loving plants. If you have dead spots, you're probably in dry. Unless you're underwater, then of course you got your swamp loving plants.
As I said, the aquatics, right?
You can start leaning into your aquatic plants. And so we've got a lot of different options. So just looking, so what I do when I think about an area, so let's take a look, is Petrina and her husband have done an excellent job maintaining their grass. And you can see it's really green. It doesn't seem to have any dry spots. We got a little bit of something right here, but honestly, we got generally pretty green. So what we can say is that we can deal with anything that likes a semi-moist soil. These plants are from another project because Petrina just bought stuff before we planned, but that's okay. We're just leaving them there for now.
Tip number 1, don't do that. Tip number 1, don't impulse buy.
So what we can do is we can say that this is probably a semi-moist, and it is moderately, from like a fertility standpoint, it's pretty moderate. It's not probably overly, because we don't tend to want to be in high fertility for our grass, but we're not also in low fertility. We can see, because we got just like a tiny empty patch, we do know that this basic soil is sandy. So you can see right here, this is just very typical what we find in our yards, but it does seem to quickly gray out. So that means once we establish plants, we're going to be more into this darker soil. This happens really often when you don't have plants in an area. It's super common for us here in Florida. And now just checking on the shady spot, we can also see it's pretty similar. We don't see some huge difference. We can see maybe there was a project where there was some rocks at some point. But honestly, I mean, and not surprising that this is not very different from the soil we saw in the other area. So what we know from these two spaces is that we can probably use similar plants from a moisture standpoint, but not from a light standpoint. Right. Another thing I need to ask for Petrina, because she sees this area throughout the year, do either of these areas get like really muddy or underwater? Yeah. Is there any sloping where you kind of notice like puddles forming?
I'm very lucky that the house, it's not, it's Florida, so hills in Florida isn't really a thing for most people, but
hills.
Believe it or not, our house sits at the top of the hill of our neighborhood.
Okay.
So because of that, the water sheds, and so we have never had any standing water whatsoever.
That's awesome. So what we know is moderately moist plants for both locations would work. And then of course for a potted plant, you're going to want to do a moderately moist to slightly drought or dry, just because pots just have a harder time holding onto water.
I don't always remember to water them as well.
Well, yeah, and that's super common with potted plants. And we need to have it where it drains, because unless you want to have an aquatic growth, which I am not going to give advice on because I'm not an expert on that, but we're going to have drainage holes. So we know that it's going to have to be able to drain during the monsoon season of summer, but it's going to go through the winter where it's not going to get rained on, and unless your sprinklers hit it. Now for our next tip, I think we're on number 4. 4?
Let's go with that.
We'll go with 4.
We're 4.
The next thing you want to do is what plants will work best for your area. And this can be different for different people in different places. But for us in Florida, there's a tool with the Florida Native Plant Society where you can put in what zip code you live in.
I've used it all the time. It's been very helpful, especially when I impulse buy.
And you can put in conditions like, is it going to be a full sun plant / is it going to be one of those plants that want swamp, or you live on the beach and you need just sand loving. And it can give you a list of ideas. And on that list, you'll notice, I think there's like an asterisk, or there's a symbol next to the plants. I'll show you here. That's going to indicate preferred plants. Those are kind of the ones that people typically use in landscapes.
Oh, I did see that actually. I always assumed that meant they were the popular ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, popular for use and popularly found at landscaping companies that do native plants.
That's helpful.
So that'll help you kind of narrow the list. The last thing I would do is when you get to the native nursery, ask people there. And plus, you can watch lots of my videos where I have tried, I think, over 60 varieties of Florida native plants. So I've done all sorts of stuff if you want to see what works and how it looks. But let's start looking at and planning out this area for Petrina so that we can get wildlife and pollinators specifically, and of course then our
predatory
pests. Not I said pests. We want predators.
I don't want pests.
Well, step 1, Petrina. We already got you one predator and already eating a bug for you. Now we already have a bunch of black-eyed Susans because Petrina impulse bought a bunch of them. So we're going to definitely be using them in this space because black-eyed Susans are what we consider like a semi-perennial. They'll live for like a couple years, but they're not going to live forever. But they'll be a really good use for space because you said bugs.
Yes.
The good ones.
And we just found a predator on one.
Already. Bing, bang, boom.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we can use those in this space because it will do well in kind of your standard, what I call suburban, urban landscape. And since you're going to already be maintaining the grass in the area, they'll do well with like the once a week, twice a week watering. And they can handle some of the deluges of summers in Florida.
Oh, the heat. They can handle.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I asked that like they're not native. Sorry.
And then the other thing is that because we have such a long space, we may want to intermix a little bit something else because this is about, let me guess, about 15 feet long.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think these panels are
about
5 or 6.
They look about 5 or 6. So we got about 15 feet of length. Each black-eyed Susan is going to take about 1 to 2 feet around. So they're going to be kind of like, notice that. That's about 1.5 feet across. And depending on how compact we want to plant, like if we really want to like really jam pack it with stuff, we could put more in. If you want to keep more of a tidy look. And that's the next thing I need to ask, which is number 5, is what kind of looks do you like? Because we can go anywhere from very tidy manicured looks, even with native plants, or we can go very wild, aka wild Floridian.
The wild Floridian.
So you can go anywhere in between. It's just important you understand what look you like, and then we can kind of work into that. So for you, Petrina, and your husband, what for this space? I know you had more specific needs for up front, but what about this space? What do you want or not want?
I definitely put you through your paces on the front yard there because we are very, you can call us particular Petrina here. But for this particular space, not so dressed, not so like perfect, you know, aesthetically pleasing and all that.
So do you want to, okay, so I always got my thing. You want to keep the crazy very neat and tidy, or can it kind of overflow a little bit in that space?
It can overflow. So the crazy doesn't need to be in a tight box.
Okay.
The one thing that we would really love in this particular space is something that gives it that more tropical feel. Because around the pool, we're trying to create like a oasis. You know?
Oh, that's nice.
So you don't necessarily have to see all of the, you know, the wood chipping and the mulch and stuff like that.
Yeah,
we're looking for lots of pops of colors, pretty, you know, tropical leaves, those kinds of situations.
Okay. So thinking about with the tropical look, and that's the thing, is there are plants that we can use that can give more of a tropical look. And now I need to think. So when I think through sun-loving pollinator and is going to be tropical, that really limits us because of size, because we also have some size constraints.
Right.
And that's another thing. Tip number 5 is you got to look at size constraints. So with the patio, if we are okay blocking the view and maybe we want privacy, then we can think through like larger plants that get into the 5-8 foot, you know, even higher range.
So yeah, we're not really looking for height here. We'd like to be able to look out at the rest of the garden and be able to see. Now, it doesn't have to be super short, you know, like up to the first, maybe a little pops above it, particularly if the flowers pop above it or something like that, but not.
So then we're more in like that 3-4 foot range.
Yeah.
And so then we're a little bit more limited. And so this is where we need to also then think through tip 6. You may have to compromise on one of your priorities. And so we should think about that. So if we're thinking tropical, things that come to mind for me tend to be more of the shrubbier ones, like privet sennas, fire bushes, things like, just put in mind, scarlet hibiscus.
Oh, well, we love hibiscus.
So, but I don't know that this is necessarily wet enough. That's what we would have to look at, because that one's going to like it a little bit moister. I think we would be on the edge of it, but it's also going to be about 5 feet tall. Okay. So that also kind of hits beyond your top line. Now, a bunch of people who know native plants for Florida are probably screaming, tropical sage! And yes, tropical sage would be excellent for attracting pollinators. And see, this is where we have to start getting the trade-offs, because when we talked about our original priorities of wildlife and predators.
I keep adding.
Well, that's okay. But then when we start hitting the plants, when we need to make decisions, we're going to have to start trading off what's more important. Is it the look or the benefit, or it's pretty or it gives lots of color? So at some point, there's not going to be, I see this sometimes, people ask me, what's the perfect native replacement for plant that's exotic? And it's like,
it depends.
It
depends on what you're looking for.
Well, it depends what you're looking for, but there's super rare that you're going to find a native plant for your area that is has all the same qualities of an exotic plant that you like. It's like saying, I want a native plant that's exactly like banana. And it's like, well, if you want the edible quality, we can talk about pawpaw. If it's because of the way it grows, you know, you're in grass type plants. You start having to trade off something. The number one I've seen is like, people are like, what is a native plant that's exactly like a zinnia? And it's like, well, zinnias are zinnias, and there's a reason. But if you want a lot of color, or you like the fact that
the big flowers,
pollinator, or you like just the process of the way people do zinnias, or you like the fact that like it opens up on the side, like there's different aspects of it, might be why you like it, but there's not anything that is a zinnia that's native to Florida. So, and there's not a plant that's going to act exactly like it. But depending on your priorities, you can find something that meets what you care about without necessarily.
So say we take, okay, because you really got me thinking there was, I gave all these recommendations of things I need, and then I said, oh, it'd be really nice if it's tropical. To be honest, it's not as important if it's tropical. It's important if it's pollinator and it brings in predators, because really the thing is, I need plants here that are going to work.
Yeah.
Like work.
Yeah.
You know, not just look pretty and we enjoy, but they've got a job to do in the garden.
Yeah. So recently I just did a video on 14 native pollinator plants that were bringing in tons of pollinators for early spring. But because you vegetable garden year round, what we want to do is look at a plant that's going to give a lot of food for our pollinators as much as the year round, because we've got really limited space. Yeah. And for me, what I would recommend is a couple plants, especially also dealing with the size constraint. We always talk about firebush, so firebush is a huge plant. So I wouldn't put it in this space at all. But one of the smaller ones would be salt and pepper.
Oh yeah, I saw that on your channel, and it's like a mound with these beautiful
white flowers.
Like, it's almost like a white and black. That's where the salt and pepper comes from, right?
And that's a Melanithera nivea. That one, it's insane how much we are getting from a pollinator action. So I would think about something like that. Okay. Other plants that drive a lot of pollinators, I would have to double check the size, but I think it might be a little bit too big, but it might bring in some color. We should also consider something like tea bush. I don't personally have it.
Is that the actual tea? Like
so this
coffee tea?
No. It can be used to make tea. This is also called gray leaf in Florida. Okay. Scientific name here. That would be another one. It can be kept like a lower shrub. It gets these pretty pink flowers on like kind of a silver gray. So you get like kind of an expansive color from the leaves, but then you've got kind of this like pink factor that adds in. It definitely does not look tropical, but everyone who has it says that they get tons of bees on it. A constant bloomer with constant color that pollinators enjoy, that's a little bit more significant and will bloom beyond even like these black-eyed Susans, would be starry rosinweed. Starry rosinweed. Yep. That one actually, for me in zone 10A, went through the entirety of the winter blooming.
Okay, that's what I need. Now, what do the blooms look like on the starry?
They're similar-ish, except it's going to be like a yellow center and the flowers are bigger. They're about this big. They're going to be more of like 2 inches across. Okay. And it's going to put out lots of shoots, and it's going to be... And why it could be potentially a nice pairing with salt and pepper. Salt and pepper is gonna be like a mound. Yeah. And then starry rosinweed kind of more like V-shaped, so it won't take up as much space at the base. And those flowers will get as it gets more and more developed year over year, it's gonna be about 3 to 5 feet tall with the flowers, and you'll get.
So then you could do like a salt and pepper, salt and pepper, salt and pepper, and then do the starry rosinweeds in between them, like as like a diagonal type shape.
Yeah, you could do like a zigzag. Another one to think about, now that's like pollinator powerhouses, but when we think about things like, so the other thing to think about is we want to think about predators and what's going to drive in a lot of predators. I don't know if you saw it, I recently did a video on my secret weapon to bringing in predators and helping stop certain types of aphids, and that's going to be milkweed. Yeah,
I knew it. I was like, wait, milkweed. Okay, so I have some milkweed. Yeah, I've been growing it from seed right over there. So how many milkweeds are we needing?
So from the caterpillar standpoint, more is better, because the monarch caterpillars were decimated so fast. What I would think about is you want to think, so from a predator perspective, you don't need a ton. What's going to eventually happen is you're going to get some aphids in, and it kind of, what it does is it's what we talked about in that other video you and I did together, right? Is that constant supply of food for the predators. And so that is a really good one. So whether you use swamp milkweed or you choose butterfly weed.
Yeah, I have both actually over there.
So that would be really pretty. I mean, so if you're, and here's where like if we did a mix of things and depending on how you want to use the space, is if you have like the starry rosinweed, you're really in that bold yellow. Right. And then that would pair really nicely with something like your butterfly weed, which is orange. But if you want to flip around,
it kind of gives it a little tropical look to it too, with the colors, you know. We're stretching it here for me.
I think it does give kind of that Florida look. And then the other one, if you want to go the other direction, if you want to go more pastels, you got your salt and pepper, and like you do your swamp milkweed, which has more of that pale pink. Yeah. And so that can look really pretty together. Now the thing is a lot of the time it's not going to be blooming because the butterflies are going to eat it to goodness, and that's great. So, or what you can even do is you could do sections. Now this is where like maybe, because they like it a little more manicured and they like more of like a do a thing, but this is where you could consider doing some balancing, where You do some starry rosinweed in the middle, do your salt and peppers at either end, and do your pink milkweeds at the end near those.
Okay.
And then put your butterfly weed in the middle section. So you got orange and yellow kind of in the middle, and then you've got your pinks and whites near the end, kind of creating kind of like a nice symmetric look.
We're gonna have to draw this out.
And if we wanted to, because we got kind of this 15-foot space, I'll turn you around, I'll show you what I'm thinking. So just to reground you guys in the area, so we could do something like a salt and pepper with a swamp milkweed here, salt and pepper with a couple of swamp milkweeds here, do some starry rosinweeds in here with some butterfly weed mixed in. If we wanted to add something like a tea bush, we could put it like in the center here, or we could ground either end with the tea bush, go large, and then do some of the flowers in the middle. And I would do, because the tea bush is kind of pastel colors, we could put those nearby. So you do like a salt and pepper, tea bushes, and then swamp milkweeds by the base. And then what you could do is do your starry rosinweeds in here. So what do you think of that kind of idea for this section?
I love it, right? Okay, so the one that I really liked, and this is you're probably gonna be surprised because I'm a little bit now into having it a little wild.
Yeah.
As wild as I can handle, but I really like the example we gave with the coffees on the end, and then maybe like
the tea bushes?
Oh, tea, but I call them coffee.
Coffee is a different one.
The coffee. No, I'm sorry. the tea bushes on the end, then the salt and pepper.
Yeah.
And then mix in, the tea bush was going to be mixed in
swamp milkweed.
The pink swamp milkweed, and then some starry rosinweed in the center with the butterfly milkweed. I love that idea.
Yay.
That's my favorite. That's what we're going to do.
Okay.
Yes.
Look forward to future videos. So let's talk the shade area and what we might want to do there.
Yeah, this is going to give you a run for your money. Nothing has grown here. Ever. Nothing.
Ever?
Nothing. Not even containers, nothing. I've tried everything over there.
Okay.
It's down where the compost lives, because that's the only thing I can get to work over there.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at that.
So come, have a seat. Join me in the area that everything dies.
So do you want to keep this bench here?
It doesn't have to. No.
Okay.
I mean, it's here, honestly, because nothing grows.
Okay.
Nothing grows. So we have compost and we have a bench that nobody ever sits on, actually.
So with the amount of shade, the fact that this never gets sun.
No, I mean, you see right here, that's the most, that whole thing is there's a little patch of sun right here. That's it.
So that's some pretty deep shade. And that's really hard to work with. But there is a couple plants that make me think of this area. So like a ground cover. And so with this area, because it literally gets 0 sun for the year and it's dry, we're really limited on things that want full shade to very deep partial shade. Anything that's like partial shade but a little sun, no. So things I would be thinking about for this space is creeping sage, which is a ground cover, but it would spread into that area. Which, since you said off camera, she told me her husband really likes the grass, so I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, no, he's a ornery old man keeping off his grass. Yeah.
But I do think what's going to happen is also it just look weird, because there'd be like this little ground cover hanging out by itself over here.
You wanted, I would think, something more substantial.
So we could do, okay, so I'm going to spitball some ideas here.
Okay.
You could put a container and put creeping sage in it and then plant something in that. That would be how you could do it.
Okay.
One idea.
I like that idea.
Idea 2, we could do a flat panel trellis of something right here.
Okay, now you're going up my alley here. I like that.
She wants a pollinators. And you know what? I love me some state butterfly. I love me some zebra longwing.
I do too.
So there is a vine that is endangered to Florida that the zebra longwings prefer, and it's not a fan of sun at all. I had it on a trellis where it gets like a couple hours of sun a day. And normally you can tell when a partial shade plant really prefers a bit more sun because they've reached toward it.
Right. They lean.
They'll lean.
Yeah.
And when vines will start to try, they'll hang off the trellis to get toward the sun. This one ran.
Oh.
It was like going back towards the house. I was like, what are you doing? I've never seen that with a vine before. And that is going to be white flower, passion flower, aka Passiflora multiflora, endangered to the Keys. And this would do really well in this area. And
it just sounds beautiful, guys. Tell me about this.
It doesn't so it does get like a drooping of flowers. I have yet to see it bloom, but who cares? You're going to have basically We could do like a panel here, just like a flat panel type trellis.
Yeah.
Or if you felt up to it, you could do one of the conical ones, which will keep it a little more compact.
Could it grow in the ground, or does it have to go into a container?
No, you could grow it in the ground right here.
Okay. So we actually have plans to build trellises against the fence. So we could put it in the ground and it can crawl up this trellis that we attach to the fence.
Yep, it will climb 100%.
And hold on, I get to say that it is endangered.
It is an endangered species.
I can grow an endangered species.
You can even grow an endangered species.
What about the cold?
It may die back.
But it should come back?
It should come back. Should come back.
I'm feeling that.
So, but we will double check that because you're in that like zone. You said you're like 9A, you're 9B.
I'm right on the edge.
So we'll double check that one.
It's a little cold.
But that would
now plus side is this area is very well protected when it's cold because you have the shed, you have the fence, you have the overhang of these trees. It does not quite get as bad back here in this corner.
But even if that one doesn't work, we could use corky stem passion vine, which it's another type of passion vine.
I was going to say, there's a lot of passion vines in this conversation.
Yeah, so that would be Passiflora suberosa, I think is the scientific name. That would be another option because it can grow in the shade. Now, it won't grow as high as quickly, and it'll probably look very stemish because the Gulf fritillaries and the zebra longwings both love it.
That's okay.
So you'll get more butterfly
Nothing
action.
else grows here. Nothing grows here.
So same thing, you could do kind of a conical trellis or you could do a flat panel trellis. Either would work.
Right.
And this one, because it's in such deep shade, actually you remember this one. When we were doing the video last time, you remember you were almost stepping on caterpillars all over the place?
Yes.
Yeah, that was because that was corky stem passion vine at your feet.
Okay.
So it will try to climb, but when it's in really deep shade, it will just stay on the
takes a lot of
ground.
caterpillars on that thing, man. I think I killed a couple.
There were like easily 20 or 30 caterpillars at her feet. There wasn't a lot of spots. And she's like stepping and I'm like, caterpillar, watch out, caterpillar. So you could do that too. And, this is where you could like have some fun. And this is where I was like, if you wanted to, you could do like a pot and then put like a small trellis in there because it will stay like way more compact, and put like the creeping sage at the base of it, and then you could run up the corky stem up a little
that
thing.
would make it seem more substantial. Because you'll have the creeping sage coming out, and then you'll have this. I'll probably find something very pretty trellis, some kind of decorative piece to go along with the what was it called?
Corky
the
stem.
passion vine?
Yeah,
corky.
And even your creeping sage will put out these little electric blue flowers that will attract bees, small bees. So that will bring in pollinators too. So even though the vine won't really bring in pollinators per se from like your bee, it would bring in butterflies, which how much that helps you in the garden, like
I just like butterflies, so that's fine with
But
me.
anytime you're bringing in lots of caterpillars, you will tend to bring in more wasps because they like eating.
And that's the predators. And hopefully while they're here having a snack, they can go over to the garden and see what they can find over there.
Yeah, and so what we're doing is we're starting to create zones around where we want to pull stuff in. And so, would you like to talk a little bit about container?
Yes, because I have a whole spot.
You do have a whole spot.
And I'm about to have another whole spot over there. Do you see them?
I know. You got monarchs already coming in.
I got a lot in here. Sorry.
Yeah. It's going to keep getting better. You're going to have so much.
Ever since I brought the black-eyed Susans, sorry, this is a little outtake. Ever since I brought the black-eyed Susans out here and they were sitting on the inside of the pool, there was butterflies like hitting, everything is hitting against the thing, and all of a sudden I have all these more little animals. Like I look around and I know at your house it's like hundreds, but it might have only had like one or two, and now I have like 5 or 6 at any time I can walk out here. Well, it didn't take long. I've been sitting here a month.
I feel like watching some of your older videos, I never really noticed pollinators in the background, and I'm starting to notice. Like in the last month, I've been noticing like, oh, there's some butterflies behind her, or like there's some bees flying around, like where I didn't see that before.
They're coming.
It's like, and that means she hasn't even put the native plants in the ground yet.
They know we're friends.
Okay, so let's go talk containers. Okay, so now we're going to start talking this space and containers. So we've got a couple things to look at. One, we are on south side of your house.
This is the south side.
South side of your house.
This is the southwest side.
So we talked about this kind of being like partial shade for a little bit of the year / shade when we're in the deepest of winter, but some of our native plants are going to go dormant anyway, so maybe that's okay. And then of course during like the summer, this is going to be pretty close to full sun,
Yep.
if not slightly partial shade from
Yeah.
a native plant perspective. Because my veggie gardeners, it doesn't mean the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. It means something else.
So when we look at this space, if we're going with containers, so a couple of things to think about with containers is a lot of times I know people who have tried to put perennial, really long-lived perennials. They end up failing at some point because one of the things people miss out on is that part of the reason that native plants can go so long is because they make substantial roots.
Okay, so that like deep taproot trying to get down
Yeah,
to
they-
like the water.
They're
table and
going
everything.
low, they're going wide, especially
Can't do
low.
that in a container.
Right. I mean, when we think about things like sunshine mimosa, which a lot of people use as a ground cover, I mean,
Yeah.
that's got roots that go 6 feet down.
I did not know that.
And that thing's only this tall.
I was gonna say, yeah.
And I mean, but many of the native plants, like versus when you're dealing with things like vegetables sit between 6 inches to 18 inches.
tops, yeah.
But when you're talking about native plants, there are many of the natives that we use in the landscape, especially ones that are going to be perennial. You're at 2, 3, 4, 6 feet down.
Okay.
And that's how they make it through drought season.
Well, that, I mean, it makes perfect sense. It's a little sad though, because does that mean containers aren't a good idea?
No, you can still do containers. What it means is that you're going to either want it on some sort of drip irrigation,
Okay.
one.
Yep.
And two, you know that you may lose some of them during the winter month more than you might in the ground because
That's fair.
their root systems are going to get a lot colder than
Yeah.
if they were deep in the ground.
Yeah.
And that's just
Because the heat underground radiates a little bit better. So when it's, I always think of it this way, when it's cold outside, it's warm underneath. And when it's hot outside,
Yeah.
it's cool underneath. It keeps all of the temperatures regulated.
Yeah, so that's where you may lose them. But there are definitely native plants and wildflowers that you can put in containers. Anything from, lots of people do starry Rawson weed,
Yeah. But
Wow.
we're going to put that over there.
black-eyed Susans, which is one of the things that you already have them.
I can do something with them. I was about to say, do you want to take them home with you? I don't know what I'm doing with this impulse buy. Now I know.
You'll see in the other video, there were a lot of sun-loving plants she wanted me to shove into a semi-shade area. And I was saying to her,
I'm a vegetable gardener. Semi-shade to
I
me
know.
means something different.
it does mean something different. But what I was saying to her is, like, I don't think these are going to live their best life. You're not going to get the real beauty out of them if you had them in a sunnier, like you could put them in a sunnier location. And this would be a lot sunnier for them.
Right.
And, you know, they're already going to die back in the winter anyways, even in zone 10, they die back. And so what we can do instead is, right, instead of cutting them to the ground and being sad that our front yard looks like meh, put them in a container. Maybe we put the container away or we're okay because this is our backyard. And so we can have stuff like that. Other plants that people put in containers, especially like full sun areas, is tropical sage. People put swamp milkweed, butterfly weed. All of those milkweeds will do pretty good in there.
Let me ask you about one.
Bee balm would also, dotted horse mint would be a good one.
Honeysuckle?
Coral honeysuckle?
Yeah.
What about it?
I really wanted coral honeysuckle, but I don't know where I would put it. I was wondering if that would make it in a pot.
Ooh. I think so. If you got a deep enough pot, you want to go with like one of those,
Like one of those?
those like
with the bananas
whiskey
in?
barrel types. Yeah, I would do it in that.
Yeah?
Yeah, I would say it was worth a try.
I'll give it a shot. You know me, I'll experiment with anything.
Yeah, so I would give that one a try. And what you could do is then you could do a small, and that one's easier to keep, like versus like some of, not the passion vines I gave you, but multiflora, or I'm sorry, passiflora incarnata. That one I would not put in a container, but that one gets huge flowers because that one throws runners out all sorts of places.
Gotcha.
It would be good in a container from that standpoint, but a big container like that probably wouldn't do great.
Gotcha.
But coral honeysuckle, that would be one that I would definitely give it a try.
Give it a go.
But the thing is it wouldn't last forever in there as long as it would live because
I think that's okay. When we think about containers, I mean, honestly, it's very hard to find a plant that's just going to live forever in a container.
yeah. So you maybe, once you get to like 2 years, 3 years, I would say like, you probably
Can you start propagating it at that point?
Mr. Cliff has been propagating my coral honeysuckle for himself.
So then what the idea could be is when you round 2 years, start propagating some of it, and then just once it gets big enough, tear the old one out, put the new one in.
Yeah. And what I would think about if you're going to do coral honeysuckle in a container is I would think about putting maybe something at the base. You could just do mulch, but because what coral honeysuckle likes to go up and then kind of fill up at the top.
Yeah.
So you could pair it with something. So you could pair it potentially with, depending on how big the container is, like we're going to go for like the whiskey barrel size. You could put it with the black eyed Susan. So then you got like the yellow and you got the coral. That could be fun.
Oh, it goes that high. Because the black eyed Susans are pretty high too.
Oh, well, so your coral honeysuckle is going to go 5 to 8 feet tall.
Wow.
If you let it run all the way up. But if you don't have the thing and you keep winding it back down, you would just have to like manually from time to time. And it's not like, not as much work as vegetables. But you would from time to time, like just have to be like, wind it back through your trellis so it just stay more down. Gotcha. So that would be one you could think about.
I love that idea. I've wanted one for a long time, but I just, number one, I didn't know where to trellis it. Number two, I didn't know where to put it.
Yeah.
Now I have an idea.
Yeah. So, and then there's one last area that we went and designed together up front.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead there. And so the last area Petrina had actually asked me about was this one up here. But the difference is that versus the other area where she was letting it be a little bit more wild, her husband and her, well, they like to have things be much more manicured up here, which is totally understandable. It's the front of their house. And so we started talking about things that they like and didn't like. And one of the big things she said her husband liked is these cordillions, which are not native plants, but they are Florida friendly. And how
They're so pretty.
They are very pretty. And they can bring a lot of color to a shady spot. And so we started talking about with the project that we are going to work on in the next video. We talked a lot about like how could we rearrange this so that we had space for some of the native plants she wanted to put in, but also keep the thing that her husband really liked, the cordillions. And so what we talked about was taking the cordillions she already has and adding them behind this little half wall right here, but mixing in a native plant, because that's the thing. You don't have to, even though you have an exotic plant or a Florida friendly plant you like, that doesn't mean you can't do one or the other. Sometimes you can mix them both in.
Mix them both, yeah. Best of both worlds.
And what I thought would be really great for you guys is putting those cordillions in and then doing kind of every other plant and doing like cordillion in the middle, cordillions on either side, and then putting in our shiny coffee, our native wild shiny coffee, which has that
what
more.
What does that look like?
Well, it's more tropical looking. It definitely has shiny leaves, and because this is the north side of our house, and that area is going to basically be in shade most of the year, they will love it there. And it blossoms and brings in bees, the berries, the birds eat. So you're going to hit wildlife, but you can shape these like a hedge line. I know someone who's part of the Florida Native Gardening Group recently showed it as a more manicured hedge line. That's or nice. You can make it a little bit more shrubby, like how a firebush can look. So you got some options, and you can bring in this.
Now let me ask you a question.
Sure.
If we plant it on the other side, do I need to get some that are tall enough to clear that first?
Yeah, so some of them can go up to 3 to 5 feet, depends on the area. But we'll always, of course, like we talked about in the earlier tips, we're going to go check the Florida Native Plant Society for some of the growth information. Plus one of our native nurseries, we can also double check there. But if you want to learn more about the project that we actually did because Petrina impulse buyed and didn't take all my tips by thinking about those things ahead of time, you can check out that video right here. Or if you want to learn more about integrated pest management and how to bring wildlife into your garden, check out this video right here. Or if you're thinking, hey, her vegetable garden looks really good, learn about those beginner tips right here. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.